that means looking very carefully at what artists do and mediating and imagining what that will be when the audience meets it. And that is my position also as a director. This is a quote by Michael Fried. It's a critique of the minimalist artists Donald Judd and Robert Morris. And it says here, Morris makes this explicit, whereas in previous art, what is to be had from the work is located strictly within it. The experience of literalist art, which he calls this, is of an object in a situation, one that virtually by definition includes the beholder. This is a harsh criticism of these artists distorting art, making it into theatre. But it's also a very precise, I think, description of a turn in art, where the viewer is not looking at an object at a distance, is entering installations, participating with your body into the artwork. And this has then obviously continued since. My inspiration to start mobile art production was an experience as an audience. In a piece by Janet Cardiff, I know I'm not the only one who has been inspired by her work. It's a piece starting at Whitechapel Library in London. You borrow a set of headphones with 3D sound. I walk up Brick Lane. I hear this kind of detective story, a woman talking in my ear. I hear her, this other woman's high-heeled shoes behind me. I come to a crossing and the woman says to me, "I'll wait for you on the other side." When I'm on the other side of the crossing, she says, "Take a left. There is a man in a grey suit walking towards you." And there is a man in a grey suit walking towards me, because I'm outside of Liverpool Street Station, where there are always men in grey suits. And for me, this was an amazing moment, because what I knew of reality was intersected with fiction. It was like a heightening sense of presence in that moment. And also, it was fascinating that this experience could never have happened inside of a gallery, because it was about the texture of reality where I was situated. So this was a moment of inspiration. I had previously been working at Jaspis, which is an international exchange program, very, very closely with artists in their studios. So I'd also seen how sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes artistic work is compromised by being shown in the art gallery. So basically, I set up to structure an organization where I could actually allow the artistic process, the curatorial and artistic process, to lead the way rather than the other way around, rather than allowing the gallery space to set the conditions and the logic of what we were producing. So that's MAP, Mobile Art Production. It was both a platform for enabling those kinds of works, but it was also kind of the experiment to understand how do the structures that we operate in affect what we can actually achieve. In this way, we could work in a very specific Baroque palace for the theme of unreality, and the Baroque, you see here, all the fictive illusions, in a private home for something very intimate, in performative works where the viewer is the protagonist. There is no division between the performer and the viewer, which is very hard in a theatre, or at night time, as that was the specifics of that particular project, to follow each project and let them lead the way and create an organization which can then follow and transform with every single demand of that specific project. We also did quite a lot of knowledge development in this, and one of the things was this publication, Imagining the Audience, which is not about communication or marketing or anything like that. It's about how artists and curators imagine the audience in the process of thinking out the work. How do we see them? How do we imagine their bodies moving through the space? What's going to happen? So, as a curator and artist, stepping inside of the mind of the audience, into their experience. I was then asked or offered to be the director of the Public Art Agency in Sweden. As MAP was an experiment also in form, it was irresistible for me to step into an almost 80-year-old organization, quite traditional for public art, to see how could that approach of kind of looking at what artists actually do and trying to transform the structures accordingly, how could that be implemented in a state structure? We asked exactly, why do we exist? I quoted my 6-year-old daughter, "Mom, why do we exist? Isn't that strange?" And we started there. And we saw the field here that the viewers, the publics are participatory in the artworks, or that public places don't just exist, they are spaces actively created, claimed and made public. That is, the audience is part of the artwork. They are not separated. They are totally immersed in one another. There are different roles of the audience. I think we have to be quite a lot more particular when we talk about this. The audience can be a viewer. The audience can be a participator. The audience can be a producer. The audience can also be the protagonist, like in Raimonda Smalasauska's hypnotic show, where everything happens inside of your mind, in a kind of hypnotic situation. You are the sole protagonist of that experience. We have all these different ways and more to think of how the audience experiences an artwork. So then the question was, how can we transform the organization in order to actually have all the skills to work with all these different kinds of audience situation and to meet what artists are actually doing? And we were looking at what would a role be. We have public art institutions that normally, I mean, there is this perceived image of an object in the middle of a roundabout, and that should be public art. But then we have artists working with agency out in the streets, really addressing the key issues of how our society is fragmented. How can we make room for these artists to come out there, to bring up those urgent issues? So we have a lot of funding all over Sweden and other countries for public art, and we have burning issues. We have really advanced artists wanting to do things. How can we recreate those structures to make them more relevant, to make them merge and meet and transform, to create a higher degree of relevance? What we did, the Public Art Agency, like most public art agencies, is an administration with hired project managers, not curators. They're just managing projects on the outside. What we said, if we are to continuously understand the development and to continuously develop as an organization, we need to have a curatorial team at the center, at the heart of the organization. The artistic process needs to be our major concern. Yes, we are a state agency, so we will fulfill all the kind of administration that a state agency has to fulfill, but that's a secondary discussion and we will solve it along the way. So we kind of turned the organization inside out and we placed the curatorial team in the center so that the people who are all over Sweden working with civil society and with everybody else could come back and feedback what is actually working, what is happening, what are the changes of society. And in that way, we can continuously develop the structures that we work in. So it's going from being an administrator to being a producing agent. We don't call our producers project managers. We call them curators because they are responsible for the artistic everything has the quality it should have. They are responsible not only for making projects, but for making very relevant and high quality projects. At the moment, we have a project, a government mission, Konsthänder, and it's asked to be in areas with low voter turnout. It's not to solve that question because of course that's not possible with an art project. It's more to define the areas in Sweden where there is less public funding for arts. The projects are to be on the initiatives of civil society and in collaboration with them. For us, that was a little bit hard in the beginning. How do we combine this initiative with artistic quality and the ways we used to work? But as we work with curating context, I would say, is the most specific term. That's what I have been interested in all along in MAP and also in the Public Art Agency. That is artworks that either are situated into and play out in a very specific context, or that demand the creation of a specific context in order to act out. So we might need a lot of different things to set up a situation where people participate. In that process, the analysis of the context is always the foundation. So we look at what is this area, what is the history, what do people think, what are the narratives, what are the needs, and in this project we do the same. So we ask different kinds of groups in society, from refugee architects from Syria to women who want a bathing house on their own in Hammarkullen. And we work together with them to find the issue. And once we find the issue, we can help them to, when the issue is defined, we can help them to find an artist who will work with this issue. And there is this collaboration that grows, and sometimes it's a smaller project, and sometimes it's actually the reforming of, say, a square in a very long-term project. So it could be anything from short interventions to long-time urban development projects. In these projects, the people we work with, they are our collaborators, they are the audience, they are the protagonists, and the main issue is to create ownership. How do we create ownership and make them feel? So eventually, we slowly pull out of that project. And again, we can do that because we understand how to depart in a context and find out the artistic issue and find the artist. And never is there a question, what is art, why is this relevant? Because we start with the relevance and then we build the projects from there. When we started this project, and I think all the way actually since I started at the Public Art Agency, we also said we have to test the limits of freedom within this structure that we are in. So we had this fantastic quote by Marina Garces: "Honesty, in some sense, is always violent and exercises violence. The violence is two-way, towards oneself and towards the real, since it means letting oneself be affected. And towards the real, because it means entering on the scene. We enter the scene and we change the scene. But we also are affected. And as individuals and as organization, if we are ready to be changed when we step into those environments, that's the only way we could possibly ever succeed with those projects. So we need to be humble, we need to listen. To communicate is not to broadcast. To communicate is to be in dialogue and listen and be ready to question and reformulate also yourself. This is quite a bad slide, but it's very useful. It's the Kinfen model, and it's useful for an arts organization. It's also useful for an administration. There is the known, the simple things that we do. For a government agency, all my mails could be asked out by anyone at any time. We can handle those kinds of things. Line production. We have the complex, knowable, the complicated. We need a specialist here in the second one, a specialist to find out about something. But we also have the complex, where we need to be a team of many people working together to think out new solutions, to reimagine how we can think about things. And then we have the chaotic, when a crisis happens and we need to get out of it. The chaotic always requires these different modes in an organization, require different kinds of leadership. A chaos requires a very firm leadership to get you out of the chaos, an authoritarian leadership. Whereas a complex process needs to facilitate for dialogue among people, to allow them to problem solving continuously. And I think often we think that we're one or the other, and I think we have to be aware that we can be all of those. And especially being an art actor and a state agency, we certainly need to have this sense-making model. That means, how do we understand ourselves? How do we understand that we have different kinds of structures? This, I would say, is also extremely relevant for cultural funding bodies of culture, or cultural policies. Very often they think they have to be in the known. Of course, all money that has to be given out to culture should be done on a transparency basis, on an equal grounds. But a grant-giving body also needs to have ear to the ground to exactly understand artistic development. So they need to win this complex side to be able to reinvent themselves. It's not only that the artistic process is complex, but our administrative processes are complex, and they have to be very precise and re-articulated in order to support those things that come from underneath. For instance, when I started MAP, the Kulturrådet in Swedish would not give funding to an organization without a venue, because that's how we considered what art is, or how we meet the audiences. So meeting audience in the street was a problem, whereas bringing them to your space was not a problem. Or when we've been working and expanded to work in 2 cities instead of 1, there was no more funding. So there is a very, for independent art sectors in Sweden at least, the limit to where you can go is very low. We had 20% permanent public funding in the end, and we met the aims at that time of having a lot of private funding, reaching new audiences, developing new skills, developing new artistic strategies, and that was never met by the cultural policies. And I'm not only, this is only an example. I see so many people out there working, being extremely inventive, and I don't always see the systems of cultural policy meeting up with that. So structures are performative. That is, when I created MAP, we could do other works. We could create other kinds of artworks and other kinds of various kinds of experiences for the audience. In the same way, administration is performative. The way the administration is structured will affect what the results are in the end. I think that in the cultural sector, we're extremely good at thinking in new ways in terms of content. I think we have quite a bit of work to do in thinking about how we reinvent our structures. I think we have to be aware of how much the structure affects what we can do. A factory with round molds can't create square bolts. It's as simple as that. So I would encourage everyone to be brave and visionary and rethink, what is the course of what we do? What is the urgency of what we do? What then do we need? Do we need a space? Do we need, what kind of administrative structure do we need? Do we need to be very small and expand in different moments? So ask those questions and then reformulate. So structures are performative. They change the effect of what we do, but they also have an affect of what the audience will experience. Thank you.